began taping. We reached out to our local schools, Cathedral, Trinity, Adams County Christian, and our public school system. And we asked for each if they could come up with 25 students. Stephen Richardson from our public schools called me, and I said, "You have 25 students for me, Stephen?" He said, "I've got 52, and I've got a waiting list after that." This project involved, I think, what was most important for us, 144 school children. So I'm going to play the first one that aired on June the 1st, 2016. Some of you have been following us on Facebook and YouTube. We launched these. They dropped every morning at 6 o'clock on both Facebook and YouTube. And this was the very first one, and this will give you an idea of the kind of format that we came up with.
Your Natchez History Minute is brought to you by Natchez National Historical Park.
President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. With the stroke of a pen, the presidential proclamation and executive order changed the legal status of 3 million slaves in designated areas of the American South. Specifically, it proclaimed the freedom of those slaves held in bondage in the 11 states that were in rebellion against the United States government. Since the proclamation was based on Lincoln's constitutional authority as commander-in-chief, the executive order did not provide for the freedom of those slaves held in areas not in rebellion, such as the border states of Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. The Emancipation Proclamation outraged white Southerners and Northern Democrats. It energized anti-slavery forces. It inspired slaves to self-emancipate by running away from their Confederate masters, and it announced the recruitment of these very freedmen into the United States Army. In the Natchez District, therefore, freedom to tens of thousands of the enslaved would come with the arrival of federal troops in the summer of 1863.
This is Jim Wiggins, retired history instructor at Copiah Lincoln Community College, and this has been your Natchez History Minute.
Format that we came up with. Now, that aired January 1st, 2016. And we debated about whether that should be the first one or not. There was another one, the Prince of Slaves, Ibrahima, that many of you are familiar with, led a New Year's Day parade in Philadelphia. We moved that to January 3rd because that's when the article came out that talked about Ibrahima. We felt that this was the most important event that we could focus on and start the year off here because it had such an impact, not just in Natchez, but across the country. You could tell the sound quality of that was pretty poor, particularly at the end. We were doing all this with an iPhone. I had never crafted a movie before in my life, and I wasn't a huge fan of social media at that point. I will never forget the first day I went out to tape students in August. We had a whole bunch of, we would go out and just tape all the students at one time, and we would have those files, and then we would craft the movies. And so this young boy, I shouldn't say boy, but 10th grade student, came up, and he sat down. This was the first time I'd ever taped anybody, and I set the little iPhone next to him. And I looked at him, and I said, "Okay, this is how this works." And he looked up at me, and he went, "Man, I know how this works." And I thought, of course you do. You're 40 years younger than I am. And when he got through, I picked up the iPhone and I said, "Okay, thanks." And he went, "You do know you have to save that, don't you?" And I was like, "I know that." And I turned around and I was like, "Okay, how do I save that?" So it was a learning experience for me, as you can imagine. But the sound quality was bad. So that launched, and we were very pleased. We got, I think, 800 views on that first one, and we thought that was a great launch. The next day, the video was about the burning of Homewood, a great mansion in Natchez that took place on January the 2nd. So when you go onto social media, the photograph that accompanied the History Minute was of a burned-out shell of an old mansion. Well, nothing gets the attention of people than a burned-out old building, particularly an old mansion. Well, it aired on Facebook. Well, every old house nut in the country liked it and shared it. And all of a sudden, we looked up and we got 8,000 views on that. But there were some comments. The sound quality is pretty bad. I couldn't hear a lot of this. So I called Kathleen. I said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "We got 8,000 views on our second video." And she said, "That's great." She said, "I wasn't expecting this to have this effect." And I said, "There was some comments about our sound quality." And she said, "Okay, you can go out and buy a new sound system." Because it showed to her that what we were beginning to see was that we really had some potential here. Now we're going to look at 3 in rapid succession. We cut out, you saw the format where Kathleen introduces that. This is your Natchez History Minute. I have heard that introduction more times than I care to hear it. So we've cut that out, so you won't have to listen to Kathleen introduce each one of these. We're being very kind to you. So we're going to go through these next 3, which are really tied to religion. And we're going to kind of do this thematically. Believe it or not, I broke the news to somebody one time. I said, there are days in Natchez history where nothing really did happen, believe it or not. And so we would take those days when it wasn't really a specific date, an event that was tied to a date, and we would do some kind of general history minute about what we felt was an important topic. So let's watch these next 3 in kind of succession here.
Rose Hill Missionary Baptist Church traces its origins back to 1837 and is recognized as the oldest organized Black Baptist congregation in Mississippi and the oldest African American church in Natchez. A deed filed in the Adams County Courthouse in 1858 documents that the Wall Street Baptist Church built a separate chapel for enslaved blacks. The establishment of an all-black congregation with its own building in Antebellum, Mississippi, was particularly unique at the time. The church probably takes its name from the Rose Hill estate that was destroyed by Union troops during the Civil War. Randall Pollard, a former slave, became the first minister of Rose Hill Missionary Baptist Church, and in 1870, the church was incorporated by the Mississippi State Legislature. After a devastating fire destroyed the 1893 building, the congregation erected the present Gothic Revival-style church, completing the interior in 1912 with the installation of a magnificent Moeller organ. Today, the Rose Hill Missionary Baptist Church is a state historical landmark and continues to play a vital role in the spiritual lives of the residents of Natchez. I'm Thelma Newsom, a member of Rose Hill Missionary Baptist Church, and this has been a Natchez History Minute.
On this day, May 15, 1850, the Mississippi Free Trader reported that a bell for St. Mary's Cathedral had arrived on the steamer Natchez No. 3 and would be elevated to its place in the tower by next Sunday. Bishop John Joseph Chance has secured a gift of the magnificent bell for Prince Alessandro Torlonia of Rome, Italy, who had paid not only for the bell itself, but for all the shipping and handling expenses. With a 40-inch diameter and weighing almost 3,000 pounds, the bell is the work of Giovanni Lucenti, a member of the great Italian bell-making family that has been in business since the 1630s. The story goes that on the night the bell was cast, around midnight, the prince, his wife, and a few friends went to the Lucenti foundry. The lady cast a gold ring into a glowing, melting mass, and all knelt down, reciting the Litany of the Blessed Virgin and other prayers. Even though most bells were left rough because they wouldn't be seen, Torlonia insisted the Natchez bell be highly polished. The bell is decorated with reliefs of the Blessed Virgin, a simple cross, a wreath supported by cherubs, and the coat of arms of Bishop Chance and the Torlonia family. 3 inscriptions recognize Bishop Chance, the donor Prince Torlonia, and the artist Lucenti. On May 26th, Bishop Chance blessed the bell according to the ceremony laid down in the Roman Pontifical and called it Maria Alexandrina. in compliment to the donor and his wife. The next day, the bell was suspended in the tower of St. Mary Basilica, where it remains today. My name is Mike Murphy. I'm a member of the St. Mary Basilica Archives Committee, and this has been your Natchez History Minute.
Holy Family Catholic Church was dedicated this day, July 1, in 1894. It is the oldest black Catholic church in the Mississippi Valley. In 1885, Reverend Anthony James Peters of the Catholic Diocese of Mississippi, once headquartered in Natchez, volunteered to serve the black Catholics in Natchez. The first separate parish for black Natchezians was built in 1890 on Beaumont Street under the pastorate of Father Peters, whose desire was to bring dignity to the black Catholic community and who desired to join the Society of St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart, called the Josephite Priests and Brothers, based in Baltimore, Maryland. The Josephites are a religious community of men who are founded to minister to the black community. In 1890, Father Peters asked the Franciscan Sisters of Pennsylvania to teach at Holy Family School, and the Franciscans remained at Holy Family until 1921, when the Sisters of the Holy Spirit and Mary Immaculate, formerly known as the Holy Ghost Sisters of San Antonio, Texas, arrived, and whose presence continues today. Through fundraising efforts in northern cities, Father Peters and Father Slattery, Josephite Superior General, sought financing for a new building, and among many financiers was St. Katherine Drexel, who suggested the name of the new church be called Holy Family. With funds in hand, the construction of the grand edifice on St. Catherine Street began. Designed by architect William Ketteringham, the magnificent structure blends Gothic and Queen Anne architectural styles. A convent was also built that year, and in 1906, the church built an auditorium cafeteria to serve the needs of the expanding school. Since 1899, Holy Family has been under the tutelage of the Society of St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart. On January 4, 2015, Holy Family Church celebrated the completion of an extensive 3-year restoration of the building, culminating in a moving rededication service. For over a century, Holy Family Catholic Church and its schools have played an integral role in the religious, educational, cultural, and social life of the black community in Natchez. Hi, I am Valencia Hall, a member of Holy Family Catholic Church and a board member of the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, and this has been your Natchez History Minute.
Natchez, as you know, has a large Catholic population, so every time we ran something that had to do with the Catholic Church, we knew we were going to get lots of views and lots of sharing. Christmas Day was the dedication date of the Basilica. That was one of the most watched that we published all year. I'm going to show you 2 videos now. As we know, history is rarely pretty, and we knew when we embarked on this project that we were going to cover all aspects of Natchez history. We weren't backing away from anything. This next video was particularly difficult for me. I remember when I went out to tape it, I would send the scripts to schools, but I had and just let the school administrators dispense those scripts among their students. I didn't pick the student to read the script. So the student would just sit down with me and they'd start reading, and it became obvious, what their topic was. And I will never forget sitting next to this 7th grade student when she began reading this particular script. And it was pretty difficult. And so there are 2 difficult videos here, and then we'll move into some lighter fare. But let's watch these next 2 here.
On this day, June 10, 1966, 3 Klansmen murdered Ben Chester White near Pretty Creek in the Homachito National Forest near Natchez, Mississippi. The men had driven to White's house and asked him to help them find a lost dog. They then drove to a remote spot in the forest where one of the men, Claude Fuller, took out a rifle and opened fire on White. Before his death, White was heard to yell out, "Oh God, what had I done to deserve this?" It is believed that White was murdered in an attempt to create a public outcry that would induce Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to come to Natchez, making it easier to assassinate him. King did not go to Natchez after White's murder. The owner of the car, James Lloyd Jones, admitted his part in the crime and implicated Fuller and Ernest Evans. All three men were charged in state court for White's murder, but none were initially found guilty. In 2000, the United States initiated a federal murder prosecution against Evans because White had been murdered on federal land. In 2003, Evans was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, where he died the following year at the age of 72. I am Leslie Lewis, a 7th grader at Morgantown College Prep Academy. This is your Natchez History Minute.
On this day, August 27, 1965, a bomb ripped apart the car of George McCall, the president of the Natchez chapter of the NAACP and an employee of the Armstrong Tire and Rubber Company. McCall had recently received a promotion at work, making him a target of the local KKK. And he had been campaigning to end school segregation, submitting a petition to the school board just the week before on August 19. Although initial reports claimed that he had died in the attack, miraculously McCall survived the bombing, although he was seriously injured. Although he returned to his job at the tire plant, McCall never fully recovered from his injuries. The attempt on McCall's life galvanized the resolve of the local African American community. Charles Everett, brother of slain civil rights leader Medgar Evers, arrived in Natchez and addressed a crowd of over 1,000 who had lined the streets as part of a mass rally. On August 28, the day after McCall's car was bombed, local black leaders presented a list of demands to Natchez Mayor John Nosser and the Board of Aldermen. Among those demands were the desegregation of the city schools, the appointment of African Americans to the school board, and the enactment of a housing code to eliminate slums. I am Carly McNeely, a junior at Natchez Early College Academy, and this has been your Natchez History Minute.
Well, when you ask your local disc jockey to record a Natchez History Minute, their production is a lot better than mine because he's using his own sound stage. So we're going to look at some that we celebrated Natchez music. We looked at the blues, we looked at opera, but here are three which celebrate Natchez's rich history regarding music. And you'll see the difference in this first one in the quality of Roscoe on the radio and my poor abilities.
American country music singer and musician Mickey Gilley was born in Natchez, Mississippi in 1936. Although he started out singing straight-up country and western material, he moved towards a more pop-friendly sound in the 1980s that brought him success on both country and pop charts. Gilley is a cousin of Jerry Lee Lewis and evangelist Jimmy Swaggart. All three cousins played the piano together as children and sang boogie-woogie and gospel music. Gilley cut a few singles in the late 1950s and played a number of clubs and bars, developing a local following in Pasadena, Texas, where he opened his first nightclub. Gilley's club later became known as the world's largest honky-tonk and featured a mechanical bull which would later play a prominent role in the 1980 film Urban Cowboy. In the 1970s, Gilley had a string of top 10s and number 1 hits, including Roomful of Roses, which made it to the top of the country charts, as well as reaching number 50 on the pop charts. The release of Urban Cowboy in 1980 gave Mickey Gilley a second go-around since the film included Gilley's remake of the soul standard Stand By Me, a song that turned the artist into a bona fide pop country crossover success. In a career that included 15 years of chart success, Mickey Gilley has had 17 number 1 country hits. For his contribution to the recording industry, Mickey Gilley has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and along with his cousins Lewis and Swaggart, were inducted into the Delta Music Hall of Fame in Faraday, Louisiana.
Hi, this is Roscoe on the radio. We'll Wake Up with a Giant on 95 Country, and this has been your Natchez History Minute.
Jazz great Marion Montgomery was born on this day, November 17, 1934, in Natchez, Mississippi. Born Marion Maud Runnels, she began her career working in Atlanta clubs before heading to Chicago. It was there that Marion caught the attention of jazz legend Peggy Lee, who suggested Marion should be signed by Capitol Records. Montgomery would release 3 albums for the record company in the early to mid-1960s. Marion Montgomery found her greatest success, however, in Britain after her marriage to English pianist and musical director Laurie Holloway. The couple embarked on a long and productive association, becoming very well known to British jazz, cabaret, and television audiences. Marion Montgomery counted among her fans Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, and British talk show host Michael Parkinson. She became the resident singer on the Parkinson's television show in the 1970s. Today, music critics have labeled Montgomery as the very best of modern jazz singers. Her final recording was for her last album, That Lady from Natchez. Montgomery died in England in April 2002. Hi, I am Beverly Adams, and this has been your Natchez History Minute.
Clarence Bud Scott Sr. led one of the most popular dance bands in the Mississippi, Louisiana region for several decades, beginning around 1900. A lifelong resident of Natchez, Scott was renowned among both white and black audiences. Although the dances at that time were segregated, the entire community could hear Bud Scott when he sang from the balcony of the Natchez Confectionery. Scott was recognized as the most famous African-American musician in Mississippi during the early decades of the 20th century. Across the state and in Louisiana, newspapers that rarely covered African Americans advertised and reported his appearances in glowing terms. Some ads promoted his band as the best orchestra in the South. The 1938 Federal Writers Project called him Mississippi's own pioneer in jazz, and named him among the 6 most nationally prominent Mississippi-born musicians. His music made headlines in 1919 when his sizzling rendition of Eliza Jane turned a sedate Meridian affair into a near riot as dancers broke rank with the old waltzes and square dances to do the shimmy, the hesitation, and the tickle toe. Scott performed for 3 presidents and entertained at pageants, military balls, political rallies, conventions, graduations, rodeos, and fairs. Scott died in Natchez on November 24th, 1938. I'm Tony Fields, Alderman Ward 4 for the city of Natchez, and I played Bud Scott during the Angels on the Bluff. And this has been your Natchez History Minute.
As most of you know, we have Angels on the Bluff, which is a fundraiser for our cemetery in which people reenact those people who are buried in our cemetery. And Tony, of course, reenacted Bud Scott. Laurie Holloway, Marion Montgomery's husband, is still alive. And during this project, we would get nice little notes from people. And he was quite appreciative of the fact that we had included Marion, his wife, in one of our History Minutes. We celebrated literature, so we had History Minutes about Ellen Douglas and, of course, William Johnson, the Barber of Natchez, which is a site owned by the National Park Service, Edith White Moore, and others. But this next one, of course, is perhaps the most popular current Natchez author. So let's do April 7th, April 8th.
Greg Iles has described himself as a 20-year overnight success story, despite the fact that his first novel was a New York Times bestseller. The author was born on this day, April 8th, in 1960 in Stuttgart, Germany, where his father ran the U.S. Embassy Medical Clinic. But Iles was raised in Natchez, attending Trinity Episcopal Day School before heading to the University of Mississippi, where he graduated in 1983. Iles spent many years as a guitarist, singer, and songwriter with his band Frankly Scarlet, but in 1993 he published his best-selling first novel, Spandau Phoenix, a thriller about Nazi war criminal Rudolf Hess. Since then, Iles has written 15 novels and a novella in a variety of genres. During his 3-year recovery from a near-fatal car crash in 2011, Isles penned a trilogy set in Natchez featuring a former prosecutor named Penn Cage as the main character. Based on a group of actual unsolved civil rights murders in the Natchez area, the first volume of the trilogy, Natchez Burning, garnered international acclaim, with one critic calling Isles William Faulkner for the Breaking Bad generation. The Natchez trilogy is set to become a major cable TV series produced by Sony and Amazon Prime, and the writer's fans are eagerly awaiting publication of the final volume in 2017, entitled Mississippi Blood. Greg Isles continues to make Natchez his home, and in his spare time works to move the city forward as a beacon of progress for Mississippi. Hi, I'm Madeline Isles. This is my dad, Greg Isles.
And this has been your Natchez History Minute and a half.
So as you notice, most of these aren't a minute. The worst part about this is occasionally I would give somebody a script and they would call me and say, I hope you don't mind, but I've edited it, which meant they had added several paragraphs to it. I didn't show you, actually, I don't think he'd mind me saying this. Butch Brown, our mayor at that time, was no longer mayor when we began in 2016, but his Natchez History Minute was March 10th, the incorporation of the city of Natchez. And in his sign-off, which I pretty much let anybody say whatever they wanted to when they signed off, Butch said, I'm Butch Brown, mayor of Natchez, and then he launched into probably a 5-minute explanation of Natchez and the tricentennial and what it meant. Well, by the time it rolled around, he wasn't mayor anymore, so I had no hesitation about cutting it down to, I'm Butch Brown, the former mayor of Natchez. And this has been your History Minute. So let's skip on the next one if we could. Let's go ahead to July 21st. Is that? Yeah. But before we start, let me just say this. One Sunday morning, I'd gotten up to go to the grocery store. You know, early Sunday morning, you don't expect to run into anybody. And I was confronted in the produce section of the Natchez market by a woman who said, hey, I've been following these minutes that you've been doing. And I said, oh, good. Well, I'm enjoying them, except I'm going to tell you right now, you've got way too much sports in there. I don't want to hear about sports. I want to hear about history. Cut all that sports out of there. And I looked at her and I said, well, now Ruth Ellen and I, can't do that. And she said, well, why not? And I said, well, let me just share this story with you, and maybe it'll shed some light on it. I said, I was at Natchez High School the other day recording some history minutes. This young man came and sat down across from me, and he stuck out his hand, and he said, hey, I'm Shavaki Harrington. I said, well, hi. I said, I'm Jeff Mansell. He said, I bet you've never heard that name before, have you? Shavaki. And I said, no. I said, quite honestly, I haven't. He said, that's because I'm the only Shavaki there is. And I said, oh. So he had a history minute about Charlie Smith, an NFL man from Natchez who went on to play in the NFL. And he got up from the table, and Stephen Richardson, my contact from the public schools, walked over to me, and he looked at me and he said, you know what? You may very well be doing a history minute about Shavaki Harrington one day. I said, really? He said, yes, 10th grade and college scouts are already here looking at him. And I looked at Ruth Ellen after I'd shared this with her, and I said, now you tell me, Ruth Ellen, what would Shavaki Harrington rather do as a history minute? One about George Smith, who goes on to play in the NFL? Or would you rather me give him a script about William Dunbar writing a dry letter to Thomas Jefferson discussing the weather in 1816? And she looked at me and she said, I totally understand, and turned around and walked off. So we do have quite a number of sports figures. We're fortunate in that regard. So let's look at a couple of them. This first one, this is the way we would, when Mike and Adrian were in the office next to me and I was in my office, we would shout out dates back and forth that whole summer as we were writing scripts. What happened this day? Well, so and so. Well, with Nuke Logan, we already had a date scheduled or an event scheduled for when he was born. So what we did was we scheduled a history minute about him the day he made his professional major league debut. So let's watch the next three.
Professional baseball player Nuke Logan made his major league debut for the Detroit Tigers against the Kansas City Royals on this day, July 21st, 2004. Born Xavier Prente Logan in Natchez on November 28, 1979, Logan attended Copiah Lincoln Community College and was named the Tigers Rookie of the Year for 2004. In 2006, Logan was traded to the Washington Nationals, where he impressed the club with his spectacular catches and speed. That year, Logan was recognized as the fastest player in Major League Baseball and ended the season hitting .300 and making several impressive catches in the field. On opening day 2007, Logan crashed into the wall in the outfield, injuring his foot. Even though he was out for over a month, Logan still managed to hit .265 that season. After signing a minor league contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2008, Logan became a free agent in 2008 and signed with the Long Island Ducks of the Independent Atlantic League, where he finished out the season. Currently, Logan owns a motivational consulting business that focuses on mentoring young people to achieve their goals. I'm Caleb McGee, a senior at Natchez High School, and this has been your Natchez History Minute.
Let's jump to November 30th on this next one, because we're running out of short of time. Yeah, November 30th. One of my favorites.
On November 30th, 1894, right here in Natchez, Mississippi, the LSU football team
stays from the stretch, and that hits it high to center field, pretty deep. Nigel Morgan back near the wall. He reaches up and can't make the play, and he fires his glove towards the ground. One run is in. Adam Jones made it inside the park home run. He's being sent. Here's the throw to the plate. He is saved
the
by the plate,
Saturday
and
evening
inside the
band
park
noted
home run
that
for
the game
Adam
was to have
Jones.
taken.
Sorry about that. Let's start this over again. That was like an actual baseball game. That was not a history minute.
On November 30th, 1894, right here in Natchez, Mississippi, the LSU football team scored its first ever touchdown and won its first ever game against the Natchez Athletic Club. The team's captain, Samuel Marmaduke Dinwiddie, became the first LSU player to score a touchdown. The Natchez Saturday Evening Banner noted that the game was to have taken place on Thanksgiving Day, but the team got stuck on a sandbar near Layman's Landing. The paper went on to say the game attracted a large crowd to the park, as a football match was something new for Natchez. It proved to be quite entertaining to those present. The visitors were entertained at the Natchez home of one of the LSU players, Hughes Arrighi. They departed the next day, and the paper reported that they were well pleased with their visit and the courteous treatment received while here. So Natchez families have been sending their children to LSU for a long time, and Natchez hospitality and game day partying are obviously well-established traditions. LSU's second game that year, unfortunately, was a loss to Ole Miss. The following year, 1895, was LSU's first undefeated season. They were undefeated again in 1896 when they first beat Ole Miss. The rivalry had begun and continues to this day. My name is Casey Hughes, and I was the third generation of my family to graduate from LSU. This has been your Natchez History Minute. Go Tigers!
Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm going to choose two more here. If we could do December 22nd, and then we'll come back to, end on December 10th.
Major Thomas Waring Buddy Bennett Jr. was born on this day, December 22nd, in 1942, and tragically went missing on this day, December 22nd, in 1972, on his 30th birthday. Buddy spent his early life in Natchez, graduating from Natchez High School in 1961 and joined the United States Air Force after being graduated from the University of Southern Mississippi and attending Columbia Presbyterian Theological Seminary. He was a Marine Lance Corporal and then pursued his dream of flying and joined the United States Air Force. He rose through the ranks and became a B-52 pilot. He was stationed in Utapao, Thailand. On December 22, 1972, his 30th birthday, Buddy and 5 other men comprised the crew of a B-52 on a night strike mission over North Vietnam. His bomber was struck by a surface-to-air missile near Hanoi. Approximately 3 minutes later, the crew began to bail out of the aircraft. It was reported by one of the returning crew members that everyone exited the plane and all parachutes opened. All 6 men were initially listed as missing in action. 3 of these men were later returned to U.S. control during Operation Homecoming. On December 15, 1988, the North Vietnamese returned the remains of 2 more of this crew. Major Thomas Waring Buddy Bennett Jr. was never accounted for and today remains officially listed as missing in action. His remains have not been repatriated. Major Bennett's name is listed today on the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. He is also honored at the Mississippi-Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, in Natchez at the Memorial Park, and in the Natchez National Cemetery. We should never forget that he was one of many from this great historical city who served his country well.
This is Jane Bennett Skelton, and Buddy is our brother. This has been your Natchez History Minute.
Before we look at the last one, just some other comments about this program. We exceeded, as you can imagine, far exceeded our expectations. We have now been seen 2 million times on Facebook. That was our largest, most popular social media platform. We have our own dedicated YouTube channel. When we got into this and started looking at statistics and demographics on Facebook and YouTube, all of a sudden we realized that we were being seen around the world, not just in the Natchez district or in the United States, but we were being seen by countries that were quite surprising. Alan Huffman, who's written Mississippi and Africa about Isaac Ross's slaves who went back to Liberia. The day after that one ran, we were also, all of a sudden, it was surprising, but then not so surprising. We all of a sudden realized that we were being viewed a number of times in Liberia. So our History Minutes were being seen around the world, which shows you the power of social media today. I couldn't have done this project without Mike and Adrian, those 2 wonderful interns. Mike is now teaching history at a boys' school in Pasadena, California. Adrian Norwood, who grew up in Quitman, Mississippi, had our internship with us, then got another internship with the National Park Service in Washington, and today is with a lead in the diversity division of a leading Washington, D.C. law firm. So I wanted to recognize those 2. We're going to see one last History Minute, and then I'll be glad to take questions. We had Roger Wicker did a History Minute for us. Greg Harper, our representative at that time, did a History Minute for us. Haley Barber did one. And then I was able to capture this man when he was in Natchez for our Natchez Literary and Cinema Celebration and ask him to do, of course, the day that Mississippi became a state. So let's run this one. And you'll recognize this voice immediately.
On this day, December 10th, 1817, Mississippi joined the Union as our country's 20th state, taking its name from the great river which forms its western boundary. The new state was carved from the Mississippi Territory, which had been established in 1798, with Natchez as the capital. Early inhabitants of the area that became Mississippi included members of various Native American tribes, such as the Choctaw, Chickasaw, and the Natchez. Spanish explorers arrived in the region in 1540, but it was the French who established the first permanent settlement in present-day Mississippi in 1699, and later in 1716, Fort Rosalie in Natchez. During the first half of the 19th century, Mississippi was the top cotton producer in the United States, and owners of large plantations depended on the labor of African slaves. The aristocratic planter element of the Natchez region initially dominated Mississippi's government, as reflected in the state's first constitution. Mississippi seceded from the Union in 1861 and suffered greatly during the American Civil War. Despite the abolition of slavery, racial discrimination endured in Mississippi, and the state was a battleground of the civil rights movement in the mid-20th century. Today, Mississippi is noted for its improving civil rights record and increasing industrialization, and of course its commitment to heritage tourism, an integral part of the local Natchez economy, as is evident in the thousands of visitors who have flocked to the River City to celebrate its tricentennial. Natchez, Mississippi, a place where the river is wide and the history runs deep. I'm William Winter, former governor of Mississippi, and this has been your Natchez History Minute. Happy birthday, Mississippi, and happy tricentennial, Natchez.
We got time for just one quick end video. We'll show you the last one, December 31st, and then we'll close. How about that? If we can go to the last one. This is the way we wound it all up.
Super soft.
Uh-oh. Not a baseball game. Yeah, at the very end, yeah.
Your Natchez History Minute is brought to you by Natchez National Historical Park.
Our city's tricentennial is drawing to a close, and what an extraordinary year we've had. From the first day of 2016 through the last, we have shared the stories of our rich culture and heritage, for it is indeed a remarkable history. With the help of hundreds of dedicated volunteers and many, many hours of planning and coordination, we presented programs and events throughout the year that tell the stories in ways that were meaningful and relevant to residents and visitors alike. But our tricentennial is not just about telling the stories of the past. It is also about who we are today and the course we plan to set for our future. The Natchez History Minute project brought together people of all ages and from every walk of life to share these stories, and we are so proud of being a part of this extraordinary project and this extraordinary year.
Coinciding with our Natchez Tricentennial, 2016 was also the year we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the founding of the National Park Service in the United States, the first national park system to be created anywhere in the world. The National Park Service holds our most priceless national landmarks and cultural icons and provides an unlimited source of inspiration and recreation. It is our country's largest museum and our largest educational institution. The natural beauty and the historical resources that are located right here in the Natchez Trace Parkway and Natchez National Historical Park are important parts of that national park system. These and other national parks belong to everyone in this country. They help to create our identity as a people, and they help guide and enrich the lives of our future generations.
And as 2016 draws to a close, that means our Natchez History Minute project comes to an end as well. And now, we need to thank all of you who have made this project so successful. First of all, and most importantly, to our over 365 narrators. Each of you did an outstanding job. You were fantastic. It is an understatement to say we couldn't have done this without you. A special thanks to our 4 educators who enlisted the aid of over 140 area school children. So many of you were good enough to conduct research, offer topics, write scripts, and assist with production. A very special thank you goes out to the staff at the Historic Natchez Foundation who answered every phone call and question and who provided so many images for our minutes. The park was fortunate to have 2 talented interns to the National Park Service's Historic Black College and University Initiative, Michael Perkins and Adrian Norwood. Mike and Adrian were invaluable to the early success of this project, and we wish them Godspeed in their future careers. And finally, to all of you who watched, liked, shared, and commented on our Natchez History Minutes on various social media sites, thank you. I hope you enjoyed watching them as much as we enjoyed producing them for you. And now, one last time,
I'm Jennifer Ogden Combs, Executive Director of the Natchez Tricentennial.
I'm Kathleen Bond, the Superintendent of Natchez National Historical Park.
And I'm Jeff Mansell, the park historian. And this has
been
been
your final Natchez History Minute.
Happy New Year, Natchez! So, I will be glad to take any questions, and Chris will bring you the microphone if you have any. Yes.
I don't remember the exact words any longer, but how is it that Natchez became the inaugural Natchez Park Service site? Those aren't the exact words in the video, but hopefully you'll remember.
The United States National Park Service was the first of its kind founded in the world. Is that?
Yes, the National Park, in 1916, Woodrow Wilson signed the Organic Act, which set in place the structure that we know today as the National Park Service. There were already about 35 parks, but this kind of brought a unifying administrative body to those parks. So, but the United States was the first country to actually have a national park system. So that's what that meant. So if you'd like to look at more, I was giving a talk to soon after this project ended, and I was giving a talk to the Natchez Historical Society, and I threatened them. I said, we've ordered pizza, we're locking the doors, and we're going to binge watch 366. So call home and tell your babysitters that you're going to be detained for about 6 hours. You can still find us. We still get people viewing our History Minutes on Facebook and YouTube. And you can go there and see as many as you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today. I hope that we see you. We got one more question here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
At the first of your program, you mentioned that Lincoln freed the slaves, the 3 million slaves in the South, and did not free any in the border states. Where Lincoln had the power to free them, he freed none, not one. Where he did not have the power, he freed them all. Would you comment on that?
Well, he acted in his position as commander-in-chief, not as in his position as president of the United States, in his executive capacity. So he freed those in which were in states that were in rebellion. True. Now, I don't know what else I could.
Parishes in Louisiana and Virginia where he did not free them,
right,
because the Union Army had control.
Right.
But again, where he had the opportunity to free them, he didn't free one single slave.
Right.
Where he did have the opportunity, where he didn't have the opportunity, he freed them.
Right. I'm not a scholar of that Emancipation Proclamation and Lincoln's role in that, so I'd hesitate to comment on that.
Wasn't the Natchez locale the richest locale in the country?
We are very careful when we say that to tourists. We talk about Natchez being a wealthy community in 1860. We've had lots of guides who like to say that Natchez was the wealthiest community in the South on the eve of the Civil War. I rarely speak in superlatives. I'm always cautioning our guides not to do that. So I think it's just, it's very, it's very sexy to say that to guides. We were the wealthiest community, that we were. There's no evidence. We would have to. I'd rather just say that we were just a very wealthy community, cotton-producing community in 1860, rather than. There's always somebody that's probably richer than Natchez. So, yeah.
Very enlightening presentation. Thank you. I was just wondering why you used the word Natchez, but nothing is said about the Natchez native actually. So I was just wondering why we use the word Natchez anniversary, but nothing is said of the Natchez people themselves.
We had I couldn't show, I just went through and brought a selection of those minutes today, but we did lots of minutes about the Natchez peoples of the area, indigenous peoples of the region. One of our most popular, of course, was November 28th, the Natchez Massacre, which took place, of course, at Fort Rosalie. But we actually had the current chief of the Natchez tribe do a Natchez History Minute, who was there for the powwow at the Grand Village. We got him to do one while he was there. So I think we covered a wide spectrum of topics and all. I think we covered just about every subject that we could possibly imagine. So, thank you.
Thank you all for coming today. I hope that we see you next week. Help me thank Jeff Mansell for this fabulous program today.